Hello everyone, this is Sanjeev from interviewbox.tech. So today I'm going to talk about the functions in Python. What are functions, what's the use of function, and why it's better to create a function in your program. So let's jump here. Okay, so functions. So if you have, like, for example, the block of code that you require to execute multiple times in your program, so it's always better to write that block of code within a function, and then it's very easy to just call the function wherever you want to write that block of code. And it saves a lot of time in rewriting the same block of code like multiple times in your program, because you once write the functions and then just call that function like a single line of the execution. And code that is written in function, like as a function, it's very easy to read, and it's very easy to maintain, and very easy to scale, because the block of code you write only once. So if you have to make any changes or add more code, you just have to do at one place instead of rewriting at multiple places in your program. And within the function, right, you can basically combine everything. For example, all your learning about your list, dictionary, loops, etc., to write in function for the clean code, and very easy to read for someone who's looking at your code, like first time. um, so in this slide, that's the syntax of function. So function is start with the keyword def is basically explained the definition. It When you use this def keyword, it tells the Python that this is a function. And after that you have a function name, and as you see here, I have write like function underscore name. So function name is defined with the snake casing, and you see, like, I'm using the underscore. And for example, when I will come to the object oriented programming where I will use the class, then class is defined as like a camel casing. So the each first letter of every word is like caps, so that is called like camel casing. So I will explain that when we will come into the object oriented programming tutorial. And after that we have parentheses, passing the argument or the parameters to your function. And then next is like colon, that is basically identify that the whatever the code is coming after that, that will be like indented block of code. And how you execute functions, so as you see, I have given like very simple example here. So you create a function with the def print underscore hello, and under that you are just printing like hello keyword. That's just a print statement. And then you call your function just with the function name, and you will see the output that I showed like at the last line. It just say hello. So that's all for how the function you can define. So let's go to the pycharm, and then we will execute it with some command. Okay, so it's pycharm. So let's create a file, like a new Python file. We can call it functions. Okay, so as we already know, right, like we have seen function, or you can say method, for the Python inbuilt data types, like for example list and strings. So we have seen some function, right? For example, append method, or you can call function on the list data type. And we have also seen like insert, that was on the list data type. So and like a method sort. So those are like we call method because that's applicable on the inbuilt data types of the Python. But whatever the same kind of, like similar kind of as a function. So let's start here with a very simple example. So you start with the def keyword, and then you say your function name, and in that you, for example, pass some variable, and you say print. For example, you want to just say hello and concatenate that with your variable. So that's how you write your function, like whatever the string you will pass, like the name variable into your function, it will just call hello that things. Like for example, if you say John, it will say hello John. So let's execute this function. So how you execute, basically just call the function name, and pass the value here. For example, you say Mike. Okay, so let me execute this, and in the output you see it says hello Mike. So that's how you basically create a function, pass some variable. So now for example, you don't pass anything and you try to run, so it will give you error because it's expecting like a one argument here, or you can say the parameter, because you have defined the name, so it's expecting something here, right? So what if you don't want to get into this error position? So what you can say is like assign some default value. So like for example, you say John. Okay, so if you don't pass anything when you call the function, it will take the default value, so it will say hello John. So let's execute this, and you see it says hello John. But if you pass something else, for example you say Jake, then it will override that default value and take this one, so it will say hello Jake. So that's how you pass, like one argument in there, or without that if you already have a default value defined there. So next I'm going to talk about like how you can get for example, so in this example we are just printing the value right within the function. What if you want to take some value out from your function, like your function is giving something, and for that we use the keyword return. That means you are doing some functionality in your function, and then you are returning some output from your function. So let's write that. For example, you have a function where you are trying to add like two numbers, and again I can make some default value, and I can say like for example 5, and you say return a plus b. Okay, so what it's going to do is basically, okay, let me comment it out this part to be more clear understanding. So what it's going to do is basically, if you don't pass this value, right, so if you call this function, it will take the default value a equal to 2 and b equal to 5 and return the sum of two numbers. Or you can pass two value here and you will get the return the sum of those two numbers. And when it's returning, so that means you have to get that value in some variable, right? Either you can do the like print here of your whatever the return is return value is coming from the function, or you can put that into some kind of a variable and use that variable somewhere, or like print. So here I will say for example sum, or number sum, right? So for example I will say 3,8, right? So when I will do that, and if I try to print number sum, it will give me the value 3 plus 8, 11. So let's try to run this, and you see here in the output it gives me 11. But for example, if I don't pass these two numbers, it's going to take 2 and 5 and return 7. So that's how you can return the value from your function, and basically use that value. So I will go over that, like from one function you do some logic, you get some output, and then that output you will example, like here we are just simply making addition of two numbers, but we can have like some more logic in there. Let's take one example. If you have one number and you want to see if your number is like even number or odd number, for example, so let's do that, and you are passing some kind of number here, And if you remember in my previous tutorial, I have mentioned like we have the mod operator, modulus operator, that is very useful to check if the number is even or odd, because if you divide your number, if you do the mod to your number with the 2, it will give you the remainder, and you can check if the remainder is 0, that means your number is even, and if it is 1, then your number is odd. So we can use the same logic here. So we say if your number mod 2, we say if it's 0, then we can say print your number is even, else we can say given number is odd. Okay, so let's execute that, and okay, so what I'm gonna do is call this method or function with, for example, 5. Okay, so it will give you the odd number because the 5 mod 2 is odd, so it says given number is odd. But for example, we ran with like 8, so that is even number. So that's how you can use let's check, for example, you want to say return multiple values. So you see here we just return like a one value, a plus b, but what if you want to return more than one value? So let's look at one of the example for that. For example, you have inventory for some of the product, right? I'm just going to create like list of tuple. So I can say I have MacBook, say like 5. So you have 5 MacBook, and I will say I have Chromebook. How many Chromebook I have? For example, 7. And then I say I have iPad, maybe 4. So I have 4 iPad, and then for example I would say another one, iPhone, and I will say I have 10 iPhone. Okay, so something like that. And you want to check this inventory and return, for example, the maximum inventory product, like, so we know here like we have the max inventory for iPhone, we have a 10 iPhone, right? So we want to return that, basically your product and the number of items that you have for that product. So let's write a function for that. So again we will say our function def, and let's call it inventory check, and in there you are going to pass your inventory that we just created a list of tuple. So you pass your inventory, and then you have to write some logic here, right? For example, you want to return your product name, right? So we will say max inventory item that you want to return, right? So for now we can just create like an empty string, and then later on whatever the product we will get, we will return that, like it's a MacBook or Chromebook or iPhone, iPad. And then let's initialize current inventory variable. We can say we have 0. Okay, so now we're gonna run the loop, and for item num and your inventory, right? So what we are doing here, we are going for each item, like basically we are looping through all the items in the list, and our list is inventory. So we are going like first item MacBook comma 5, and item will be representing to MacBook, num will be to 5, and we will check here the logic, and we say if num is greater than our current inventory. So our current inventory is currently 0, and we are checking our num. So num is 5. So 5 is greater than 0. That is current inventory. So what we're going to do is, in current inventory, we will put the number. So now our current inventory will be 5. And our max inventory item will become our item. So in the first one we check, so first one we put into, the max inventory item is MacBook, and current inventory is number 5. So now again it will go back to the second, and it will first check the number, and for the second loop the number will be 7, and we know the 7 is greater than our current number, that is like the current inventory, that is 5. So it will put 7 into the current inventory and update the inventory item from MacBook to Chromebook. So that's how it will keep checking in the loop. So that will be your logic, and at the end, when it will be done by looping all the elements in the list, it will just return your max inventory item, and comma your like current inventory, like how many items you have. So that's like you can return like a multiple values. So let's execute this function, and then we will see. So our function name is inventory check. So we are doing inventory check, and in that we are passing our inventory, that is our data set basically, and here we can put that in a like a result, and when you print the result, you will see it will return iPhone with a maximum 10, and you see here it says iPhone and 10. So that is your maximum inventory. But for example, I can add here like another one. I will say some kind of tablet, okay, and then I will say I have 20 tablets in my inventory. So when you will run this, and you will see right now, now it basically give you the tablet 20, because that's your max inventory item. So that's how you can create a function, define your logic, that what you want to get output from your function. And my main goal was to show you, like if you want to return more than one item, then that's how you can return. So that's the example. So now let's check where you can get the value from one function and pass into the another function. So let's look at the example for that. I will comment it out this one. So for example, I'll write name, and here I am passing, for example, first name of the person and last name of the person, and I'm basically returning first name. So that's how you concatenate, right, with using the plus symbol. So here what I'm doing, this part I've just add like the space in between first name and last name. So I just concatenate first name space last name. So this is the method where we are getting two parameters, like first name last name, and returning the full name. And now I have another method where I'm going to use this. So what I'm going to do is create another method with the person info, and in that I am going to take, so for example, if I have to execute this method right here to get that, so I can say name full name. So because I will call this full name function, get the output into the name, and pass that name into the following method person info. So here so I pass the person first name last name and get the full name into the name variable, and here I can create another variable to pass that name, right? So what I'm doing here is default getting the name, and given name is my just argument in which I'm passing the name variable. And now I can have like another variable, for example 53, and then what I am gonna do is like, okay, let's use the fstring method here, and I will say given name, that whatever the name value will be is okay. So now we got the name from the first method, and you use that name into the following method, and you add one more argument there, like age, for example, you're using, and then you are executing this method, and it will give you like given name John Oliver is 53 years old. So now let's call this method. So that is your person info, and here you don't have to pass anything because you are passing that name as a default. Okay, so let's execute this, and you see here in the output, so it says John Oliver is 53 years old. So but for example, if I pass Mike here, and now it says Mike is 53 years old. So if you are not going to take the default value, that is the name we are passing in the argument, so you can even use your own, so like for example Mike here. But if you are getting the name from some other function, you can specify that as a default value, for example. So that's how you take one basically output from one function and pass into the following function, or like anywhere within the different function. So next I'm going to talk about let me write down here. Star args and star KWR, so that is like represent R1. But what if you are going to write a function and you don't want to put like positional argument up front, you don't know how many values you want to use. So for that we are using the star args for the list, the sequence stuff, and then key W arguments for the mapping, like the dictionary, where you don't have to specify the number of argument up front, and you can use like arbitrary number of arguments. So let's look into create a method like number sum, and you don't know how many variable you have in your list. So what you're gonna do is you specify with arbitrary number of arguments like star args, and then you call this method sum, and you say like whatever in the element that I'm passing as argument, when I will call this function, just create a sum of that. So for example, if you call your sum method, number sum, and then you can pass like whatever the item you're gonna pass, like for example this, and when you call this function, let me comment it out this part. You see here it just create the sum of all the 5 elements that you pass here. So that's the main use of this arbitrary argument that we are using with the star args. So that's basically you don't have to specify upfront what are the numbers. You can pass like whatever the number you want to pass, it's gonna work like, just as it is. So that's the main benefit of this. And when we will go into like a more advanced programming, then you will see that I'm going to use this a lot. So that's very useful. The same thing with the keyword argument for the dictionary. So let's look at the example for that. For example, I create a function and it says my favorite color, and I don't have like any dictionary defined or something. So what I'm going to do is I say like, okay, my keyword argument, whatever it's coming when I will call my function, and then I check if create some kind of variable to check as a key. I say if color in kwargs, by default is going to check into the key. So I say if that is there, then just print so my favorite color is kwarg. Sorry, the format method. I already showed the f string above, so this time I'm going to use the .format method. Okay. Okay, so what it's going to do is basically when you will call this function and you pass like some dictionary in there, what it's going to do is basically going to check this particular key, and it says like if this key is exist in kwargs, then you will get the value of that particular key. And if it's not there, then we can print, you can say I did not find any color. So we can say that. So now let's call this function. So by calling this function, you have to pass some value in there. So what you're doing, you're calling this, and here you have to pass some like key is your color, and the value will be, for example, red, and you can have another key, for example, juice, and value will be, for example, orange. So now when you will pass this, right, so this is your dictionary, that's how you're passing. So you are checking this color key and you find this, so it will return from here the kwargs of color, it will return the value red, and it will say my favorite color is red. And if you don't have red, so first let's run this, and let me show you this output by commented out this here. Okay, so it says my favorite color is red, but what if it didn't find your color key in the dictionary? So for example, instead of color we have rose equal red. So now we don't have color key defined in there, so it will say I did not find any color. So you run this and you see it says I did not find any color. So that's how you basically you don't have to upfront define your dictionary. When you call this function, you can define that, right? So now okay, so again when you ran this, it will give you the color. Oh, sorry, it's a string. Okay, so my favorite color is brown. Okay, so that's how. So now the next thing I'm going to talk about the scope of the variable. So by default, whatever the variable you create in function, the scope of that variable is just you create one variable like total equal to 0. So there are like three different ways. So one is like global variable, one is like local variable, and one is like enclosing variable. That is if you have function within function and then you define the variable under the first function and you try to use the variable inside of the second function, so that it becomes like a non-local uh, keyword that you have to define with that variable. So here I created this variable total equal to 0, and then let's try to use this within a function. So I create this function number, and I will say I create another variable total with a value 2, and I say total print total, right? So let me call this one. Okay, so what I have right here is like create the variable total equal to 0, and then define a function number in which I create another variable with the same name total, and then increment that and print the value of that total. So when I call that function, what it does is basically, let me call that again, and as you see, when I call that function, it prints the total value of total variable is 3, but then I call the print function on just the total and it gives me the value of 0. How come is that? So because whatever the logic or the functionality I'm doing within the function, it just stay there. It's not making any changes to the global variable total that I define. So if you want to update this total that I define at the top, what you have to do is you just mention with a global keyword. So when you will write this, then basically you tell this function that I'm gonna use the global variable total and then do the functionality on this one. So it will make changes to the variable that is defined at the top. So now let's run this function, and you will see now the value is 3 and 3 because now whatever we are making logic inside the function to the total variable is basically using the global variable that defined at the top. So that's how the scope of the variable defined. So if you have to use a global variable within your function and make some changes, you have to first define with the global keyword within your function. So that's all for the function topic. If you like this video, please press the like button and please subscribe handling. So please look out for my next video, and yeah, thanks again for watching this video and coming to my channel. Have a great day.